Hi there. Let us walk with you on some very old Precambrian shield rock that forms part of the north shore of Lake Superior in Lake Superior Provincial Park, south of Wawa, Ontario. In this video, we are looking for disjunct Arctic alpine plants that grow on these ancient rocks. These plants are remnants left behind when a thick ice sheet melted away at the end of the last ice age, about 10,000 to 15,000 years ago. Hi, I'm Andy Fyon from Rambles with Robin and Ruby. It is June 6, 2025, and we are headed to Smokey Point headland in Lake Superior Provincial Park to look for disjunct Arctic and alpine plants along the north shore of Lake Superior. Access to Smokey Point headland area and Lake Superior is via a bush trail that leaves Highway 17. The trail is about 1.5 kilometers long to Lake Superior and is quite rough in places. Once the trail reaches Lake Superior, the challenge becomes that of walking along cobble beaches and rocky outcrops along the shore where it is easy to slip, fall, or worse. This is part of Lake Superior, the largest of the Great Lakes. Lake Superior straddles the Canada-US border with the Canadian province of Ontario to the north and east, and the U.S. states of Minnesota to the west and Michigan and Wisconsin to the south. Lake Superior formed about 10,000 years ago when water from a melting ice sheet filled a billion-year-old volcanic basin. Lake Superior is the largest freshwater lake in the world by surface area and the third largest freshwater lake by volume, holding 10% of the fresh water in all of the Earth's rivers and lakes. Its average annual temperature is about 4 degrees Celsius or 39 degrees Fahrenheit. In summer, the lake rarely warms above 16 degrees Celsius or 61 degrees Fahrenheit, and the deeper waters remain near 4 degrees Celsius or 39 degrees Fahrenheit year-round. It is the cold water temperature of Lake Superior that brings us to this area of Ontario, Canada. Let me add a few more comments about the water temperature of Lake Superior. This image, produced by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, shows the surface temperature of the Great Lakes in July 9, 2025, a little more than a month after our first visit to Smokey Point. Despite the July 9 date, the water temperature of Lake Superior in the area we hiked, shown by the red arrow, had warmed to between 5 to 7 degrees Celsius, or 41 to 45 degrees Fahrenheit. That cold water is illustrated by the blue and green colors applied to the waters of Lake Superior. Contrast the cold Lake Superior water temperature with the warm waters of Lake Erie and Lake Ontario, shown in the red and purple colors. Lake Erie is dramatic because its surface temperature was 28 degrees Celsius or 82 degrees Fahrenheit on July 9, 2025. The second NOAA image shows the surface water temperature of the Great Lakes on June 6, 2025, the day we hiked to the Smokey Point area, enclosed by the red circle. That day, the water temperature of Lake Superior along the north shore was between 3 and 4 degrees Celsius, or 37 to 39 degrees Fahrenheit, as shown by the blue color of Lake Superior, which represents the location of cold water. Again, these cold waters of Lake Superior contrast with the warmer waters of the rest of the Great Lakes on June 6, 2025. The cold temperature of Lake Superior water was the reason we looked for Arctic alpine disjunct plants along the north shore. The cold Lake Superior water creates cooler springs and summers with lots of fog and milder winters, especially along the north shore, compared to the inland areas and the other Great Lakes. That cold climate creates an Arctic alpine habitat along the rocky shore, which helps sustain a number of Arctic alpine plant species that thrive in that cold climate, like this encrusted saxifrage. Botanists call these disjunct plant species because they normally grow 1,000 kilometers or more to the north in the Arctic, subarctic, and in the mountain alpine zones. Simply, these unusual Arctic alpine disjunct plants are stragglers left over from the last ice age, preserved along the North Shore coast because of the local cold climate. Our first challenge was to walk the 1.5 kilometer bush trail to Lake Superior. While the trail is reasonably well marked with flagging tape, we did manage to get lost on the way out because we followed a side trail. It is Friday, June 6th, and we are in Lake Superior Provincial Park, just at the north end of the park. We're going to try a hike here to get to a place called Smokey Point, which is on Lake Superior. This will be a little bit interesting because I'm actually supposedly walking on the trail. So it'll be a subtle walk, or a subtle trail. I see some blue flagging tape every so often. So we'll keep our eyes open, and at the end, hopefully we will be rewarded with a small headland called Smokey Point, and hopefully on that headland there will be some Arctic disjunct plants. The first part of the trail is, we're about 100 meters in from the highway, and we're following along the edge of a ridge, a rocky ridge, lots of moss. And on the floor, it's quite wet. Some marsh marigold over there, and parts that are quite peaty, but really no standing water, unless you break through the peaty stuff. So we've just walked across the plateau, trail plateau, and we're starting our descent towards Lake Superior. We're leaving white spruce, balsam, birch, white birch forest with lots of wet areas. We're just walking along the edge of this cliff here. The trail is quite easy actually, and once you get away from the highway, very well marked. For a seldomly used trail, that is. And we're now this is a little steeper place on the descent to the lake. It's a little slippery, so we're being especially careful here. And you can see no shortage of flagging tape. Just pausing here to pick up there it is up there. So the trail goes south and then swings west along the lake. And that's what we're doing now. We're doing that segment just north of the lake, still in the bush, but heading west. So we made it out to Lake Superior. We have to walk a little bit further to the west to get to Smokey Point, but there's certainly lots of headland rock here. But we'll just follow the trail along to the end of Smokey Point and see what's there. Temperature dropped probably, I don't know, 5 or 10 degrees coming out of the forest. Now I'm just going to pause and look for a flag. Well, we made it out onto Lake Superior. That's Smokey Point. We're going to try and figure out how to get onto it. And this is the little cove and a rocky beach. Supposed to be a campsite in here someplace, but it's subtle. So we're just leaving the beach. We're going to see if we can find a way to actually get up to Smokey Point, which is right there. And it doesn't look easy on this side, so we're going to walk back a little bit and see if we can find a break in the slope. I guess this is the campground, or the campsite, I should say. And of course, you always worry on the way back. It always looks different on the way back. So we'll see if we can find our way back. It is marked in places, but there are places where you really had to struggle to find the trail. It's a little tricky. And to walk on this stuff. Yeah. So we're not going to get up onto Smokey Point, but there is some encrusted saxifrage right there. There's a little area here. It's not in flower, but it's on a point ahead. It's on a point looking out onto Lake Superior. And across a draw is Smokey Point. And we don't see any way to safely get there. So, success anyways, to find some primrose and some encrusted saxifrage, and we're going to head over that point over there, and hopefully we can find a way walking along that shoreline, because it was pretty ugly going through the bush off the trail. Interesting, where we find the encrusted saxifrage, there's this yellow-green lichen on the rock. And there's about 3 or 4 or 5 little clusters up there. But as you look out across the headland, you see there's very little lichen, or much less lichen, certainly much less of the yellow lichen. And we're not seeing any plants down there. Certainly no encrusted saxifrage, very little else. Early in the season, so hard to say. I'm pretty sure there's some campanula growing here I can see, but anyway, I guess the encrusted saxifrage needs enough protection from the ice and the vagaries of Lake Superior that the upper reaches of the headland are where it has found a home, along with shrubby cinquefoil, the Primula mistassini, tufted bulrush, round-leaved sundew, low-bush blueberry, bearberry, and Virginia strawberry. Interesting from a geological point of view, this rock that hosts the saxifrage, the encrusted saxifrage, has a lot of feldspar in it, and may in fact be some sort of pyroclastic rock with fragments and crystals of feldspar. So we just walk over it. For example, up here, you can see pretty clearly with the toe of my boot the crystals of feldspar. And occasionally you can see what look to be little fragments. So this may be a volcanic rock, And given that encrusted saxifrage really requires or seems to favor calcareous areas, the calcium is probably coming from that feldspar that's weathering. But that's a different story. After looking around the back side of Smokey Point, we exited using a narrow crevice where we came across some very leggy encrusted saxifrage. We're looking at a wall here in this fragmental rock that's wet, kind of northwest facing, and it's just covered with a plant that has encrusted leaf margins. It's just all over the place in here. Now it looks a little bit leggier than the encrusted saxifrage, but it's unbelievable how much there is in this shady area. And some you can see have runners, and I wouldn't say that, I don't know if they're runners, but they're kind of hanging on by rhizome or something. But these it does look like the encrusted saxifrage spent flowers, so they just look leggy, that's all. After leaving Smokey Point, we explored more of the rocky shore. Although the rock was dry, it is still slippery in places, and we had to be careful to avoid falling. So just walking back on this fragmental rock full of feldspar, lots of little tiny liverwort, a Thalos liverwort. The mossy substrate in cracks in this rock, right beside the primrose, bird's eye primrose. That's quite neat. On the rocky shore, we also saw common butterwort, an Arctic disjunct plant species, and lyreleaf rockcress, which was growing in the cracks in the rock. I am used to seeing lyreleaf rockcress growing on sand substrate, so it was rare for me to see this plant growing on the exposed rock habitat. This is another headland. There's not too much here. We've seen some bird's eye primrose. It is starting to rain and the rocks are getting wet. That makes it quite a bit more challenging to scramble around out there on those headlands. So we did see some Arctic disjunct plants, which is good. So the trip was worthwhile. Our return hike was a little exciting. Trails always look different on the return leg, and in this area there was a second flag trail which we accidentally followed for about 30 minutes. I always run 3 navigational tools when in the bush: a GPS, the Gaia map tracker, and a Garmin personal satellite locator to ensure we know where we are and to send a distress message if needed. This is the Gaia map track of the return hike, and it is obvious that we got off the main trail. So we had to bushwhack through the bush, off the trail, to locate the original trail. So it turns out there's a couple of trails that are flagged in here, and we ended up following the wrong flag trail. So we're kind of bushwhacking without a trail flags to follow to take us back to the original trail we used to get in. We'll try and intercept that, and that will reduce the excitement associated with bushwhacking. Now, bushwhacking would be okay if there were moose and bears, but it's nothing. And the bush is a little wet because it started to rain. So we'll see when we hit the next trail, hopefully. So after that little half-hour excursion, we're back on the correct trail, at least the trail that we came in on. So it's a heads up that There seem to be at least 2 different trails in here, and it's easy to follow the wrong one. But we're okay, we're back on the trail. So that's a wrap for the trail to Smokey Point. We didn't make it to Smokey Point, but we looked all around it. It was just too steep, and there were too many gullies or fissures that really precluded getting through the forest to the headland. But we did see a couple of Arctic disjuncts. We saw lime encrusted saxifrage, mistassini primrose, lyreleaf rockcress, bearberry, tufted bulrush, and common butterwort. I also saw my favorite, Phthalos liverwort, possibly from the genus Marchantia, which is not considered to be an Arctic alpine disjunct because it ranges continuously within and outside Arctic alpine areas, but it is nevertheless quite an amazing plant lineage. The trail itself, the first kilometer is pretty flat, easy walking, although you're in and out of dry and wet. And when wet, there's standing marsh marigold there, so you know it's very wet. The last 0.5 or 0.8 of a kilometer, we found pretty rough going. There's a lot of vertical, a lot of switchbacks. There's an elevation gain. I don't know how much, but there's quite a descent, and on the way back, quite an ascent down to Lake Superior. So the trail itself, I think, would be just fine for people who are comfortable hiking in this sort of terrain, but probably not a trail you'd want to bring a young child along. It's just really tough going at the far end. We got rained out, so we turned around before we finished looking at all the headlands. But nevertheless, what we saw was quite interesting, and the fact that we saw the encrusted saxifrage is really good. So that's a wrap for now. You can hear the traffic behind, so we're about 100 meters from the highway. And we'll see you later.